It's time for our Scar Survivor program. Joining us in the studio is our good Dr. Hancock. Just pull that mic to you there, sweetheart, so you can talk to it. We'll get your
Hello.
We'll get your headphones on, and of course, joining us from across the pond today, my good friend Debbie Ray Rivers. Hey, Debs.
Hi, Shelley. Good afternoon.
Well, what is our topic today, ladies? You guys were posting about the inquiries into today's discussion, and lots of interest out there. So we've got the recording going. We're ready to
right.
talk about the important mission that you guys talk about every month.
Hi, Debbie.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Hey, Dr. Hancock, thank you so much. I don't know what we would do without you, but today's going to be a great show. We're going to talk about, and it's an important topic, it's about healing without justice and without seeing justice. And before we get into it, I just want to welcome everybody to the radio show. Thank you for tuning in today and spending the next hour with us. So for those who are here for the first time, I'm Debbie. I'm the Executive Director of SCARS. SCARS stands for Saving Children and Revealing Secrets. And we are a Bermuda charity whose mission is to reduce the risk of child sexual abuse in our Bermuda community. I'm also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I'm a mom of 2 survivors. Our co-host is Dr. Hancock. Dr. Alicia Hancock is a valued SCARS board member. She's a friend and a very skilled clinical psychologist. So, Dr. Hancock, thank you again for being here.
Hey there.
So Survivor Hour, everyone, is just another platform for SCARS to spread awareness and to be an advocate and a voice for the children of Bermuda. Children also who have been abused, sexually molested, and even our adult survivors who were molested as children, right?
Yep.
We're here to advocate for them and for children who've been sexually molested and their affected families. SCARS Survivor Hour, it provides our survivors of childhood sexual abuse an opportunity to be heard if they choose to call in, but also to provide hope that healing is possible after experiencing child sexual abuse. We want to thank our wonderful sponsors, Conduit Foundation, for sponsoring this monthly, hourly radio show. Their generosity truly helps us to advocate, to educate, and to affirm our survivors of child sexual abuse. And we are really, truly grateful to them. So huge shout out to the Conduit Foundation. So today we are going to discuss healing without justice. You know, when survivors of child sexual abuse don't see justice, it really can be another form of feeling powerless. It really can. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Hancock is going to help those out there that have experienced that have experienced this feeling of powerlessness because they didn't see justice. You know, as an advocate, I've been asked this question, how do I heal without justice? And I've been asked that question a few times over the last 14 years. But most recently, I was asked at the end of a SCAR training. And I truly hope that the beautiful lady who asked me this recently is listening today, because this show was birthed from her question recently. And so I hope that she's listening, and I hope she can feel a little lighter after this hour. And our hope is that our survivors who are listening, who've never seen justice for the crime committed against them when they were little, that they also will feel a little less heavy, a little less burdened, and hope that they have a bit more peace in their hearts after this broadcast. That is our hope. Now, before we get into this conversation, I just want to remind everyone, as we do every month, about our broadcasting rules. The show contains sensitive information, and it's intended for adults only. So to any adult survivor listening this afternoon, we also want to recognize you. Please remember that you have the power to change the radio channel. If this show, and it may cause some feelings to come up, please take care of yourself. That is extremely important. And as adults, we have the power to make that decision. So if you're not feeling really strong today and you just don't think you can do this, please change the channel. You can always go back and listen to our shows because they're on our website, scars.com, under media, and then SCARS Radio Hour. We do post these shows on there, so they're on there. If today is not a good day, we totally get it. But your well-being comes first, and it always does. and taking care of you is what matters. So you make that decision. If you need some help after the show, there is a 24-hour mental health crisis line, which is 239-1111. 239-1111. If you're driving, you can always, stop and email me at some point, or info@scars.bn. But your well-being is and a priority. The number here, if you want to call in, you're welcome to call in. The number here at Power 95 is 292-9595. Now, this is a sensitive topic, so when calling in, we do ask callers, do not mention your name or a perpetrator's name. That's really important. That has to be vetted in advance, so we thank you for that. Also, be mindful that this show is not meant for personal attack. It's meant to educate and empower and advocate for the children of Bermuda and for our survivors of childhood sexual abuse. I do want to say, if you have a childhood story of sexual abuse, we just don't have a way of confirming that. So if you want to just come on and say, I'm a survivor, absolutely no worries at all. We have yet to reduce the social stigma. I say that in every training. So we never stop anybody from saying they're a survivor, but just no names mentioned when it comes to naming perpetrators or any detail of abuse that could give anything away that we're unable to vet in advance. So thank you for respecting that. I just want to remind also everybody that we're not legal experts. We can certainly answer questions about surviving child sexual abuse. I'm a survivor. We can certainly answer questions about how trauma affects victims because we have a skilled clinical psychologist on this call. But we won't be able to answer legal questions. So no questions around that. But you can always email us as well at SCARS, and we'll find the answer for you. I also want to say absolutely no attack on any lawyer, judge, or magistrate. But please feel free to call in if you wish. 292-9595. Okay, Dr. Hancock, let's start talking about healing without justice.
Okay.
I guess the first question is going to be, can a survivor of child sexual abuse heal without seeing justice of the injustice that happened to them when they were little?
Absolutely. I mean, healing, it's possible even without the legal justice or the perpetrator even facing consequences, but it's often incredibly complex, very personal, and quite non-linear, And so many times, when we think about what justice means, we have to kind of define that, right? Because it can mean different things for different people. And so, getting the time in court is only a part of the puzzle. It doesn't completely heal a survivor, but more important elements include being believed and validated, having their story heard, regaining a sense of control and safety, and just even seeing the harm acknowledged as truth. Those are kind of general elements that are a big part of the puzzle, as well as, being able to see legal justice occur is often what's wanted. But unfortunately, sometimes not only is it the getting their chance in court, but also the perpetrator facing the consequences or being found guilty, which sometimes doesn't happen, unfortunately.
Right. Or even, even as in my case, getting a 16-month sentence after years of being affected by their actions, right?
Oh, yeah.
Getting a short sentence could even feel like not having justice. When you get a short sentence compared to the years of trauma that we endure, that can feel like an injustice, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Because sometimes, we do have to go by the law, and that could happen. That could make a victim feel like, wow, they have freedom taken away from them for 16 months, and I had the freedom to be me and to be joyful, and to have all these negative outcomes, is a lifetime, and they have 16 months. So that could feel like, I haven't had justice, right?
Oh, yes, you can feel completely re-traumatized by the fact that this person, they got a short sentence, or even when a perpetrator denies everything that happened, right. but getting a short sentence can definitely reactivate the trauma, quite a bit, create the same level of powerlessness, or even when something later in life triggers the same feeling of feeling a lack of control, it can reactivate the sense of powerlessness. And so that's why healing in terms of, getting the help, getting the assistance, joining group therapy, to talk about your story is often a very key part of the healing process.
Yeah, and having people in our life that support that.
Yeah.
Right? That is a huge part, is, having that support with people that can validate why we're feeling the way we're feeling. Right?
Well, yeah, that's often the beginning effect, right? So when it first happens, or when it's first acknowledged, the people you want to be able to count on to be supportive is your family. And so if family, for instance, family or friends, they're not believed, then that's a form of like betrayal trauma. And that can lead to having difficulty trusting other people. Feeling unsafe in, in any close relationships. Survivors just may stay away from getting involved in intimate or even close relationships with people because there's a sense of abandonment and rejection, or there's going to be a sensitivity to feeling abandoned or rejected because they're now going to then start even questioning their own judgment of what happened because they're not believed.
Yes. Yes. Now, do you believe that it takes longer to heal for those that don't get their day in court than those that do? How do you feel about that?
Well, to be honest, I think
harder? Is it?
I think it can be harder, but I think what ends up happening in that situation is we have to help them reframe their expectations of what healing is, because many times if that was a definite part in their minds, I'm definitely going to feel better once I get my day in court, and they're all prepped for it, and then they may not get their day in court because maybe the perpetrator killed themselves or died unexpectedly, or they it just didn't go to court, then we have to help them reframe their expectations, because what you don't want is for them to just stop everything, where they just don't feel the need to to get any help, or they're just so angry that they just internalize everything and just hide away, so to speak. So reframing, and that's why kind of starting the healing process, starting things like therapy and group therapy, individual therapy, ahead of time, as soon as you acknowledge and want to start healing, premature of any court case is very essential and very helpful, so that if this does happen, you already have the emotional support, but you also have gained some tools ahead of time to be able to cope, because you have no control over what happens in the court. And unfortunately, the justice system doesn't always get things correct or get it right. Right,
exactly. I mean, that was, I don't even know where it came from, because I was clueless 24 years ago. But, when we went through this with my children, I did have to say to them, I wanted to prepare them for the worst.
Yep.
And say, he may not go to prison, but we're still doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Because adults are not supposed to commit crimes against children. That is against the law, and we're doing the right thing. Yes. But I did prepare them, because I didn't want them to be, that's all they were expecting. I just wanted to let them know that this may not happen. He may not see the inside of a jail cell, but we're still doing the right thing.
Yeah, you don't want them to have the belief that they need to have their day in court, that they need to face the perpetrator in order to heal. Because if that becomes a part of the ingredient, so to speak, of the recipe to heal, then that could completely have them totally fall apart, and where they just go back into their cocoon, and they don't say anything, and they don't talk about it anymore, because it took a lot for them to probably acknowledge it to begin with. So that's why we want to just kind of manage the expectations of what healing looks like, even just talking about what healing looks like before we even start.
Yes. And I truly believe that the man that sexually abused my children had only sexually molested my oldest daughter, It would have been his word against hers. It would have been a very different situation.
Yeah.
But he made the grave mistake of sexually abusing my youngest, and then she told right away, and that's how we found out. But we don't have when it comes to this type of crime, there's no witnesses. And it's
Correct.
usually one word against the other.
Yep.
When it comes to this crime, it's one child's word against an adult, because we know that molesters don't do this in front of their peers or their loved ones. Most of them will deny their actions. They don't want to see the inside of a jail cell, and nor do they want their freedom taken away. So how does a victim, speaking of that, and this didn't happen in our case because, he admitted it, but how does a victim of this crime move forward from a not guilty verdict? Help us with that.
Well, first you have to really just allow them to speak what they're feeling, understand what's happening, understand what they're feeling, that all of those emotions that they're feeling at that time have to come out. But it's very, very important that we help them also come to terms with the fact that this, although this did happen and the perpetrator got a non-guilty verdict, that what happened still matters. That their experience is still real, that the court, just because the court didn't find them guilty, it does not mean it didn't happen or that it wasn't wrong. And that would take a lot of time to work through, so that they don't go, they don't start questioning themselves. They don't start mistrusting their own beliefs and their own perspective.
And having regrets that they they got that far and they should have just kept it quiet. Like, why did I just have to go through that? Because
well,
that's what's so difficult.
Well, the thing is that what we have to do with them is we have to help them understand too that even though right now it's hurtful, it's sore, it's frustrating, that over time working through it, that you will feel that sense of the sense that you were courageous enough to speak your truth, that you said it out loud, and the perpetrator knows what they did. The perpetrator knows, and they're having to hear it, and that actually, is a consequence. They have to sit there and listen to the story of what they did to you. And so that in itself, even again, sometimes healing and sometimes justice and sometimes consequences don't come in the form of anything that's overt, meaning external. It's within the message sent behind everything. It's within the internal dialogue and feelings that people experience as a result of hearing the information, having to hear what this person did to them in detail. And so
and that's true. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, sometimes in my personal case as a survivor who did report the man that abused me, then he tried to blame me, even though he heard what he did to me, then of course, telling me all the reasons he did it was because I wanted it at 8 years old. So, we still can't let those things, put any self-blame on ourselves, because as we always say, I don't care if a child begs an adult, I don't care what they're wearing, I don't care what they beg, I don't care what they say to an adult, that adult has a responsibility, and it is not use children for sexual gratification at all.
No, I think
not okay.
And the thing now is the difference, I think, probably between the number of adult sexual abuse survivors that never got a chance to tell their story or were never believed, versus now is, back then, I think, again, we were taught to respect adults, and whatever adults said was truth, and whatever children said may or may not be accepted or factual. An adult's perspective was believed more than a child.
Trumped by children.
Yes,
because they're adults.
Mm-hmm. Yep, because adults. If an adult says it, it must be true. Versus if a child says it, well, maybe not. And I think that was unfortunately the way that society was back then. But now, it's different. Thank goodness, it's different. Yeah,
that's what awareness does in a community. When you turn it on its head and say it is not okay. I mean, what happens when survivors never get that confession? from a perpetrator, or they aren't believed by family members, or they never see their day in court? How do we encourage them that although they did not receive any of that, their experience was real and it should not have happened? How can we really encourage them, whether that's our friends, family members, obviously the people in your field and the skilled psychologists, all of you out there helping people with this? How can we who are not psychologists, how can we encourage them that although they didn't see any of that, their experience was real and it should not have happened? They were little.
Yeah, well, one of the things that's probably quite important that, that therapists will do this naturally, but, people on the outside may not understand, is that a lot of times when you have somebody in your life that you care about that is expressing their feelings about this particular issue, is you just want to jump in and fix it. Right. You want to help. You want to fix. Right. You think by helping is fixing it. Right. And that's actually far from what is expected, because sometimes jumping in to fix it also can be internalized and interpreted as, that you're just trying to silence me. Right. Because I just want to vent my feelings and I want to talk about it. And because, the person that I'm talking to might be uncomfortable, as like, say, I'm talking to a friend that, they're so uncomfortable, they just want the conversation to be finished because they're uncomfortable with it. So from a survivor's perspective, we have to be very careful on how we communicate with them about, that if this particular issue happens, one of the things is just naming their feelings, helping them name their feelings, supporting their the abuse and, what happened to you was very serious and it makes sense that this feels unfair, especially if they don't get their chance in court. A short sentence doesn't reflect the impact this has had on your life. And separate justice from their worth. That's probably a very important ingredient. Separate the justice that they're looking for from their actual worth. That they don't need that to heal. It's helpful, but it's not necessary. Because, all of the work in therapy is not necessarily just talking about what happened to them and what the perpetrator did. It's about kind of regaining their sense of control and kind of redefining who they are outside of basically externalizing the abuse rather than it continuing to be internal, where they define themselves.
Yes. If you're listening, anyone listening out there that's never seen justice, just know that you're worthy. You have self-worth. And the fact that person has never paid the price of whatever price that is, and no matter what, pain that they caused you, you are still worthy.
Yeah.
That's so important. And surrounding yourself with people that can do that and really give them that space to do that, right?
Yeah. And you can say things like, your pain, what you survived, they're not defined by the sentence. The system didn't reflect the harm that was done, but that doesn't say anything about your worth or value.
Yeah. And that's up to them. That they have to take control of really believing that as well.
Yeah.
Can a survivor continue to be mentally attached to the person who sexually violated them as a child? Like, how does one navigate refusing to let that person hold any space in their life? How do we do that?
Yeah, and so that's very difficult, because of but it's so common. It's very, very common. What we call kind of trauma bonding. And essentially, essentially some of the patterns will be, where they, there's emotional patterns like defending or minimizing. These are signs, when you see a survivor, they defend or minimize because the person that is trying to support them, might want to help conquer, might want to help, get back and speak, speak terribly of the perpetrator. But unfortunately, what ends up happening if you do that too much, you're not aware of where the survivor is in the mentality of their abuse or their abuser. They will start to defend the abuser. they'll start to minimize what happened. Because unfortunately, again, the manipulation of the perpetrator of a child is so, it's so intense. It's so intense. Particularly depending on how long it happened, that can be the extent of their childhood, of what they remember about their child, of this person being in their life. So they might have a sense of loyalty. They might have they might feel loyalty to them, but also, want to harm them, and so there it can be very convoluted in terms of how they react to a perpetrator when they feel they're so connected. So that's where it's important to, before we jump in and express what we think and feel and think that we're helping them and think that we're supporting them by saying, that was terrible, and what a jerk, and I can't believe he did that to you or she did that to you. You have to be very careful that where the survivor is. Because if you hear silence from them after that, that's a sign, that's a red flag that they're probably not quite there yet. That they might feel that they can say something about them, but if they hear it from somebody else, they may just, not intentionally, but but unintentionally start defending the perpetrator. Oh, he wasn't that bad. And then the reaction to that kind of comment can really kind of then harm that conversation. So be very careful about how you approach the survivor with that. And so it's really about letting the survivor talk through and understand where they're at. It doesn't mean you are agreeing with them. It just means that you understand. You can understand why and how they became attached to this person. To help, what actually helps them loosen the attachment is not by being forceful, but just, supporting them. It's a gradual process. You think like you're supporting change, you're not forcing it.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, I think you need some years of got to go to school to be a psychologist, because I don't think I would be good at that. Well, because as a friend or a family member and somebody who's been abused, it's like, what? And that's hard. I'm so glad you said that, because we do have to pause,
We do. We have to, we can't assume that we know what the survivor needs or wants from us. We can't assume, right? We can't assume. And so because the cycle in our brain, it actually causes survivors to sometimes associate the perpetrator with both pain and comfort. And I know that sounds twisted, but the problem is when somebody is in your life and somebody is allowed to be in your life and do these things to you, you start normalizing it as a child. And undoing that is very difficult.
Yeah, and let me say, perpetrators are very sly, because they're going to want to stay on the good side of their victim, their survivor. They're going to want to keep making the survivor feel that they're loyal. Whether that's financially or giving gifts or having the answers to everything, right? And so that survivor might be still holding on to that person because they're doing all these other good things and making the bad things look good.
Well,
Could
think
that
about
happen?
it. Oh, absolutely. The perpetrator, is attaching to the child through creating basic, fulfilling emotional needs like attention, safety, security, validation, belongingness, kindness, and so for a child, how is a child to not interpret that as okay, or it at least maybe creates confusion about, they did this to me and that doesn't feel right. However, they haven't been mean to me. They haven't been aggressive. They haven't got quote unquote hurt me, from a child's perspective. Things like normalizing for the survivor, normalizing their mixed feelings of feeling, that they care, but also feeling hurt, and that they don't have to resolve everything at once. acknowledging their experience,
Yeah.
because there were times when the perpetrator hurt them, and there were times that they were really kind afterwards. And, gosh, that must have been very difficult. How did it feel? So those kind of conversations will actually be very helpful for a survivor. Without, again, like I said, without us jumping in to fix it, or to jump on their, on their bandwagon of hating the perpetrator and saying, all these terrible things about the perpetrator, even though they're true. We have to remember where they're at. We have to remember where the survivor's at, and see and read where they're at before we jump in and figure out what they need, not what we think they need.
Yeah. But that's really, really good point. But so the healing process from child sexual abuse doesn't have to equate to justice in a court, in terms of a courtroom. Is that right? Like,
No.
We can still heal without seeing that, even though that's a part that makes us feel better that somebody was held accountable for a crime that happened against us. It doesn't necessarily equate to healing, right? It doesn't.
No, it can
to
be
happen in order to heal.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you think about a recipe, it can be part of it. Many times, it's part of most survivors' ingredients to heal. But when you think about a recipe that we do at home, sometimes we don't have all the ingredients. We have to find an alternative. And so,
Right.
and so we want to make sure that, and that's why I said before, if the survivor starts their healing process by, getting some help, getting some, attending therapy or group therapy, or talking to people that they trust and love to start that support process, then they're better equipped to deal with the lack of justice that may or may not occur. Because then you can actually prepare yourself for the fact that, it's more about seeing, because even if the perpetrator gets, 30 years in jail, that does not mean that you are completely healed and you're fine. I guarantee that will not happen, because this has affected every part of your life after that. The healing.
Well, most never get 30 years. Trust me.
Well, I know. I'm just, I'm speaking.
I'm
speaking it into existence. How about that?
You.
I'm speaking it into existence.
I love that. And it's so true. I mean, I read this article in Psychology Today as I was prepping for this. It said, it quoted, "The judicial system acts as the conscience of a country. Many times victims seek relief in a courtroom, hoping that justice will alleviate the pain and the stigmatization of being a victim of the monster who scarred them." And, I wrote this for myself. I said, I can only speak for myself, a victim at the age of 8 years old. And although the 72-year-old man who sexually molested me, Debbie, as a little girl, he was convicted. He admitted sexually molesting me, and then, of course, turned around and blamed me. But his admission of abusing me, nor his conviction at his short 3-month sentence, that didn't heal me.
No.
It really didn't. It was more the psychological justice that helped my healing, which is always understanding that it was not my fault. I didn't cause it. I understand, the psychological scars and all the things that I feel after, as a result of what he did to me as a little girl and the result of his actions. That has helped me to heal more than his short 3-month sentence. Because I was re-traumatized in the courtroom as he stood there, beginning to talk about how I wanted it. So, and he told me that to my face, that I wanted it. Yeah.
Yeah, because the
article. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want you to.
Well, because the thing is that the sentence that anybody gets, once they go away, I mean, there's this kind of euphoric effect of, okay, he's gone, I feel okay, I feel better, but you would have had no intention of being around this person anyway, even if whether they're in jail or not. Does it make you feel safer? Absolutely. But the problem is that feeling of justice then wears off, and then you go back to your life, and you're still reeling in the same potential issues or typical kind of many common issues that many survivors experience, which is, it doesn't mean just because he or she is away in jail doesn't mean you just automatically start trusting people again. It doesn't mean that you feel confident within yourself again. And so a big part of it is like reclaiming yourself. Does it help? Yes, but it's not a cure. You have to reclaim the choices in your life, reclaim your body and your story. Sometimes doing things like making sure that, the potential issues that you might experience, like depression or anxiety, that have maybe prevented you from taking risks, prevented you from making certain choices in your life because you were too scared. All of those things are many times the residual effects of sexual abuse. And then not trusting people and your relationships are harmed. It doesn't mean you just automatically go ahead and say, okay, well, I'm ready. Now that this person's been sent away, I feel better. I'm going to, I feel like I have the tools to be able to get close to people. It's not that simple. You think of the years and years that you've lived with this reeling around in your head over and over again, and potentially having kept it a secret for so long. It is not, it's not a quick fix. It's
true. And the article it stated also that something very interesting. It said, if you hinge your recovery on judicial justice, waiting for your day in court or when he or she gets what's coming to them, you may never recover. Sometimes the only personal justice is recovering and living a great life. What the perpetrator did to us didn't define us. It will not hold us down, and it will not stop us from succeeding. It's really loving ourselves and telling ourselves, like, you are not going to do this to me. You will not continue to have me living this life, this prisoner life in my head that because I didn't see the judicial justice, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely when you say, when the perpetrator did to us didn't define us, didn't hold us down. A lot of times survivors, they can get to a point where they can say that, but there's a huge, many times there's still a huge disconnect that we have to reconnect where they actually believe it and feel it. Because we can say anything, but if we don't feel it and believe it, then it won't, it won't result in the actions that suggest that. And
how do we do that? How do we fill that up? Fill that almost like that love tank for ourselves.
Well, we have to recondition the brain, right? We have to, because the brain is conditioned to lead with negativity, to lead with doubt, to lead with fear. And so the awareness of how your behavior is impacting the choices that you make currently is part of it. So it requires a lot of insight. It requires a lot of conditioning the brain of narrating it differently. So it's not just a one-time thing. You have to put it into practice every single day. Live your truth of, I am enough. And then finding evidence. What helps to attach the emotions to it is finding the evidence, looking for the evidence to support why you are worthy. Just in a regular day, at work, with your children, with your friends, just on a daily basis, you have to find the evidence and look for it to prove to yourself internally that it is true.
Right. And maybe that takes journaling too, like, writing down, all of the,
Yeah, journaling actually really helps to identify what your real narrative is on a regular basis. Because sometimes a lot of our thoughts and feelings are unconscious, like we're not aware of them. And so when you write, after a period of a couple of minutes, your subconscious thoughts start revealing themselves in your writing. That can definitely be a huge asset to get a chance of it.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, just after a conversation recently with another survivor, but, when a survivor has to continue to be in the life of their perpetrator, who's never been held accountable, can that delay that healing? Because that perpetrator's still in their life. They know what happened to them. In their mind, they're thinking this person has never been held accountable, but this person is still, and, you know, usually this pertains to family members, and we know that, you know, family members sexually abuse children too. But how does that survivor, and I'm thinking of a few in mind, but how does that survivor deal with that? Because they have to continue to go to those family functions. They feel this obligation because they're related to them, and other people will be hurt, and so they're not really ever getting their justice, are they? Because they're I mean, it may never go to a court, be heard in a courtroom, but they're almost still imprisoned by that, are they?
Well, they can be, right? They can be, and unfortunately, in those circumstances, which unfortunately probably happens more than we know. You know, decisions have to be made in terms of how to function, how to not allow this person to take up their space and their time with their family. You know, and so, you know, and sometimes a lot of it is about reframing. So if the survivor wants to still attend family functions and family members either don't know or they don't agree to not allow this person to come to family functions, then the survivor, you know, has a choice to try and set the best boundaries that they can within the situation, or have boundaries for themselves in terms of what they're willing to tolerate and not tolerate. Because, you know, if a survivor has worked through the healing, they can maybe even get to a point where they can attend these family functions and almost, you know, rise to the occasion, you know, rising above it and saying, you know what, you're going to have to look at me every day or look at me at these family functions and know what you did. I know what you did. You know what you did.
Just don't let that perpetrator be around children. That's what right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can't let that happen.
Yeah.
We really have to do our best to not let that happen.
Yeah. And it's okay for you, you know, forgiveness is an important journey as well, and that's different for everybody and what that looks like. But you know, perpetrators just don't wake up one day and, you know, a 30-year-old and decide they're going to be interested in a 6-year-old, right? I mean, that's and especially if it's never been addressed and I don't know, can they just suddenly stop being sexually interested in that 6-year-old? I mean, that's why we have to be careful, make sure we don't leave children alone with those who are sexually abused.
Yeah. I mean, don't think for a minute that a perpetrator can really ever heal to the point where they don't have those feelings. I think, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the research will show that the most that we can hope for with a perpetrator, if they have received treatment, is that they can resist the urge. That's probably about the extent, the appropriate treatment that unfortunately we don't have.
Effective.
Yeah. It's got to be, and even after treatment, you know, it's not just a 6-week program and then it's done. It's continuous. But the most usually perpetrators can hope for is to resist urges based on consequences, or they've addressed potential, you know, hopefully guilt of what they've done. That kind of triggered me just now. So, you know, it's okay to be around, but you just make sure they're never alone with children. Like if that has never been addressed, just please don't. You're an adult. You can say no. You can protect yourself, but just be very cognizant of this person being alone with children. Be aware of that, especially knowing that there's a step-by-step process that perpetrators go through. They go through grooming, right? So it's not just, they're not going to do it in front of you, but what they might do that will look quote unquote normal is that they will have children around them. They will talk to them. They will be the fun person. They will be the nice person. They will be the person that tries to draw kids towards them. So that's where it starts. So don't,
Yeah.
we don't want to wait until the grooming's done and then the child is now drawn
Yeah.
to them outside of being around family.
Yeah, and it's okay if grown-ups wish to have a relationships with adults that sexually molested, that's okay. Nobody's judging you for that. Just be aware that and be cognizant of, if it is a survivor that you know about, that they have the right to make choices, right? And do what they need to do to take care of themselves, so they might not go to that family event because they have to take care of themselves, the survivor from that loved one who's in your life that sexually molested children.
Yeah, we have to be careful not to make it personal, right? Because if family members make it personal to themselves rather than, being understanding and not judgmental towards the survivor, then, you're going to lose that. You could potentially lose that connection with the survivor, because the survivor is going to be
that doesn't help.
No, it
doesn't help the survivor's healing.
It doesn't, because a survivor is very hypersensitive to things like rejection, to things like not being supported, not feeling important enough. And so anything that fringes on that feeling is going to cause them to likely retreat and, internalize again and go back in a cocoon.
Right. Right. I mean, I want to just use this phrase that I heard, psychological justice, right? That really can help
powerful.
Healing.
Yeah.
Right. That's very powerful, because many survivors may never see their day in court. But the psychological justice is a gift to yourself.
Yeah, it's internal, right? It's a form of internal justice, whereas the external justice is the legal justice, right?
Yes.
It's legal justice. It's family and friends. Support system. It's all everything external that we cannot control. That survivors cannot control. So being able to control the only thing you can really, which is focusing more on the psychological internal justice, is going to be where you're going to find the most effective way to heal. Yeah,
to take care of you and to know that no matter what happened, that was not your fault, and you are worthy. And I personally was able to take the agonizing pain from my children being sexually violated by a 72-year-old trusted family member, and I was able to turn that into a purpose. And my daughters, I made them feel like that their life has purpose.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I think many survivors have done this without even realizing it, right?
Yeah.
Many survivors, adult survivors that I've spoken to, they do have a purpose in their life. They're moms. They became a parent. And then they became a protective parent or a dad, and they became a protective dad, or they became a teacher, and they're, have that protection, the work that they do and the career that they chose, and being there and helping kids.
Yeah.
Maybe that didn't happen to them, or they're become coaches, and they're empowering children on the field, and they're going to be the safe coach that maybe they didn't get, or a policeman. All of these are career choices that to me is huge in terms of their healing, right? Or a therapist, or a counselor, or an advocate. These are all purposeful, and that is part of your psychological justice. Is I'm not going to allow somebody who did something to me and violate me to stop me from my life and to become a purpose to other children and to be a protector, right? And working with kids and being a rescuer, even if you're on the front line, being a voice for someone else, that is time does not necessarily equate to justice. Psychological justice is so important to get yourself realizing how special you are, what a purpose you have in this world, and how valuable you are. And no matter what has not happened to the person that violated you, if they've not seen justice, that doesn't mean that you can't heal.
Correct.
It does not mean that you can't heal.
No, not at all. I mean, like I said, it's part of the puzzle, because what we're trying to do is take the abuse from the inside of you in terms of how you then identify yourself and how you live life through it, and slowly but surely removing it from your internal self to something that's external, because you'll never forget it, but you can at least reframe it so it benefits you, where you don't have to live in that fear and in the fear of how you felt as a child. You don't have to continuously live that narrative in your entire life.
But know that you have scars from that. Like that, it does leave behind emotional scars.
Oh, it certainly does.
Right? But yeah, it's just so important. Thank you so much. We can heal without seeing the justice from a courtroom or the justice from reporting, as an adult. The justice is for ourselves because we are so important. That's what I believe. That is, because I don't, even 30 years, which we don't see in prison, doesn't take away our pain.
No.
It doesn't take away our emotional pain. It really doesn't. Because they can get out and continue living their life. We're still left with the scars. It's more working on us, you know?
Yep, identifying
and the best
ways.
version of ourselves.
Identifying ways that you're courageous, that you're resilient, it doesn't mean that you are it doesn't mean you're trying to forget or you're trying to minimize what happened to you, but you're just trying to not let it define you and what your future looks like.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hancock. Thank you for working through this. For all of you listening who never saw justice, we're not going to pretend we understand how you feel because we don't. We can't. I was personally able to read a letter to my perpetrator describing how he changed my life forever through his violation of my little young body. And I also saw a sentence, that required him to sit in a jail cell for 3 months. And, although that in the eyes of the law, that was considered justice, none of that removed the memory nor the scar left behind. And we know that, right, closure can look different for everyone.
Yeah, and
right?
that's actually one of the things that I sometimes will do in my therapy sessions is have the client write a letter to the perpetrator, and also write one back to state what they deserve to hear, what they would like to hear, what they think they deserve to hear, as a form of, just helping to heal, because what they deserve to hear, right, is what they need to hear. So.
Yeah, but some perpetrators, it'll go in one ear, out the other. Like mine, didn't even hear one word I said, and all the damage that he caused me.
Oh, absolutely,
right?
And it's more. But that again, reading that letter and having that letter, even if you're not in front of the perpetrator, is more about you speaking your truth.
Yes. Yes. Not expecting something out of it. Exactly.
Correct.
Sometimes. The gift of closure may have to come from within when justice isn't served in a courtroom. Yeah. But just never forget, all those that are listening, the absence of justice does not mean the absence of truth.
Correct.
It does not mean that justice hasn't been served either. Because one thing I believe is that children were never meant to be used sexually, never. And I also believe that this crime is the most serious. There is a price to be paid when one sexually violates innocence. It may not look like a jail cell. It may not be a guilty verdict. It may not require a victim impact statement. It may not allow a confrontation. It can be worse, in my view, than all those things. My children got to see their 78-year-old perpetrator temporarily lose his freedom for 16 months and then be released and move on with his life. And although in the eyes of the law, that would have been considered justice. Yeah. But none of it removed the memory nor the emotional scars left on my little girls.
Correct.
Scars that they still carry with them. Scars that I, as their mother, continue to support them through. Yeah. And, in my personal view, an adult who used a little one for sexual gratification and never saw the inside of a courtroom or a jail cell will have to face another judge. I personally believe that. And it will be handed down a harsher sentence.
Yeah.
Because this is what I believe, Dr. Hancock. You don't mess with God's little ones.
Yeah.
You don't. There's a high penalty for that. That's what I personally believe, because child sexual abuse causes a little one to stumble, and it will leave them wounded.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And at the end of the day,
And-
what people do to harm other people, it comes right back to you in some way, shape, or form. It'll come back to you at some point.
Yeah, yeah. When you hurt little ones, that's not okay.
It's
That's not
okay.
And
No, because you're changing. You're
and
changing
so-
so much. You're changing the chemistry in their brain. You're changing their emotional development. You're changing everything about their development. So.
yeah, yeah. And we all need to take this crime very, very seriously. Because guess what?
Yes.
A child abuse will affect us all. It will affect us all. Because that will go on, that can move on into their adulthood, and we've seen what can come out of it. And so it is so important, everyone, that we do everything in our life, in our power, to make sure children are kept safe. We really do, we really do hope and pray that those listening today, those survivors of abuse who never saw justice for what they had to endure as a little child, please know that you are special. What happened to you shouldn't have happened. You are so valuable, and your battles from the scar left after abuse does not identify you. It does not. Please believe that, and we hope you do. We really hope you do, and that's going to be in your time. But we're with you, right, Dr. Hancock?
Yeah. Yes.
We're here to support, and healing is possible. It just takes time. It takes time, and it does take support from the loved ones in our life. It's very important that we support our survivors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any last thoughts, Dr. Hancock?
I think a lot of the internal dialogues that we want to reinforce with our survivors, is when you don't get the justice, is saying I can heal with unanswered parts. I can heal despite not getting justice. And I'm worth it to put that energy into myself. I'm worth it to give myself a chance to overcome this trauma.
Yes. Yes. Love yourself. Love yourself. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Hancock. Again, I really hope that any survivor out there that didn't see that just feels a little lighter. I really do. Believe in yourself and give yourself that gift. Really do. So on behalf of SCAR, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hancock. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, guys.
Thank you, Bermuda Broadcasting. Yeah, thank you, Conduit Foundation. Our next Survivor radio show is scheduled for Wednesday, April 15th, everyone, at 1:15. Stay on if you can, so you can we can share this song with you that we chose again for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for coming in. Looking forward to doing next month's one as well. And of course, for those who can relate to what the topic was today, there are all sorts of support mechanisms around if you don't have that family tribe around you to support you, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yes.
And they need to
reach out.
There is a tribe. You need to reach out for it, and SCARS can refer you. I'm sure, right, guys?
Yeah.
Dr. Hancock can certainly point folks in the right direction for the support that they need, because like she was saying before we went on the air today, there was a lot of interest in the banner for the show today. Like, it was read by a lot of folk. So perhaps there's going to be some people being able to sort out their healing issues. We hope so anyway. And we're going to call
We sure do.
on our very, very own beautiful young Brittany, Bricks we call her, and her rendition of the Andra Day song, Rise Up. Thanks, ladies. Looking forward to seeing you next month.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Take care.